I dreamed of the perfect cruise with my daughter and her husband. Ocean waves, laughter, family harmony. But halfway through the trip, the captain came up to me and whispered, "Leave this ship at any cost. Your son-in-law is planning." I thought he's crazy. But he came back, his eyes full of horror. "Please, I beg you. You won't believe what happened 30 minutes later." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The house smelled like wood smoke and old coffee when I walked through the front door that Wednesday evening. My joints ached from 2 hours, sitting on metal chairs at the Veterans Hall, listening to Davidson ramble about budget allocations for next year's equipment purchases. I dropped my keys in the ceramic bowl Elma made in high school back when she still smiled at me and shrugged off my jacket. That's when I noticed the light. My study door stood half open, warm yellow, spilling into the hallway. I never left lights burning. 36 years inspecting fire hazards taught you habits that stuck. I moved down the corridor, sock feet silent on hardwood, my pulse ticking faster with each step. Leonard sat at my desk, not near it, not beside it, in my leather chair, the one I'd owned since 1987, spine straight like he'd bought the furniture himself. Financial documents covered the desk surface, bank statements, investment summaries, the property deed, my private papers pulled from the locked drawer I knew I'd secured that morning. He looked up without surprise, without guilt. "You spend too much on nonsense," he said, tapping a statement with his index finger. "Time to share with family, this house, those savings." My throat tightened. "Get out of my study. Alma deserves security. We deserve security." He leaned back in my chair, making the leather creak. "You're sitting on assets while we struggle. This is my house, Leonard." I stepped forward and reached for the deed, my hand crossing into his space. His movement was fast, too fast for someone who'd seemed relaxed. He surged from the chair, grabbed my right wrist, and twisted. The pain hit like electricity. I tried to pull back, but his other hand clamped my forearm, wrenching it in directions arms don't bend. Something inside made a sound, wet branch snapping under boot weight, and the strength left my legs. I hit the floor hard. The impact rattled my teeth, sent my glasses skittering under the bookcase. My arm was wrong, angle impossible. Pain radiating from elbow to fingertips in waves that made my vision spark. "Dad." Elma's voice came from the doorway. I turned my head, saw her silhouette backlit from the hallway fixture. She wore her purple bathrobe, the one Leonard bought her last Christmas. Her face was in shadow, but I could feel her looking at me. Her father, 64 years old, curled on his study floor, cradling his arm. "Dad, why do you provoke him?" "Not. Are you hurt?" "Not. What happened?" Just that question, soft and tired, like I tracked mud on clean carpet. The physical pain meant nothing compared to those 6 words. Leonard stepped over me. His shoe passed close enough to my face that I smelled leather polish. He paused in the doorway beside Elma, looked down at me one final time. "Now you'll know your place, old man." His footsteps retreated. Elma's followed. A door closed somewhere in the house, their bedroom probably. Then silence thick and complete, broken only by my breathing and the creak of the house settling. I lay there on the carpet I'd steam cleaned last month, my right arm screaming, and stared at the ceiling. The overhead light fixture needed dusting. I'd noticed it Tuesday and forgotten to grab the stepladder. Funny what you think about when your world cracks open. But underneath the pain, underneath the shock, something else was growing. Something cold and patient. I'd spent 36 years investigating fire scenes, learning how small things, frayed wires, oily rags, careless cigarettes, could destroy everything. I understood cause and effect. I understood evidence. I understood that some situations required immediate action, while others demanded careful planning. This was not a time to rush. Leonard had made his first mistake tonight. He'd shown me exactly who he was. He'd proven that my suspicions accumulated over 2 years of watching him manipulate Elma, control household decisions, make subtle threats weren't paranoia. They were accurate assessment. My arm throbbed with each heartbeat. I didn't call out, didn't cry for help. What would be the point? Elma had made her choice clear. Leonard had established his dominance. They expected me to accept this new reality, to understand my diminished status in my own home. Instead, I lay still and let my mind work. Fire investigation taught you to read a scene, to separate accident from arson. The burn patterns told stories. The evidence revealed intent. You learned patience, documentation, systematic evidence gathering. You learned that the truth, properly assembled, became undeniable. Leonard thought breaking my arm would break my will. He was wrong. I'd built cases against arsonists who thought they were clever, who believed they'd planned perfectly. I'd sat in courtrooms and watched their confidence crumble under the weight of documented facts. I knew how to build something that couldn't be ignored or explained away. The pain in my arm was real, immediate, demanding, but it was also evidence. The first piece in what would become Leonard's undoing. I finally pushed myself to sitting position, using my left hand against the floor, my right arm cradled against my chest. The room swam briefly, then steadied. My phone was in my jacket pocket, hanging in the entryway. I had to get there. Had to make the call. Not to Elma. Not to Leonard. I stood slowly, carefully, every movement sending fresh pain through my arm. The house remained quiet. No footsteps, no voices. They'd gone to bed as if nothing significant had occurred, as if they hadn't left me bleeding on the study floor. Actually, I wasn't bleeding, just broken. There's a difference, and it matters. The jacket hung where I'd left it, my phone, a rectangular weight in the pocket. I pulled it out left-handed, thumb fumbling across the screen. The numbers glowed too bright in the dark hallway. 911 simple. I'd made the call dozens of times in my career, usually reporting fire code violations, sometimes actual emergencies. Never for myself. The operator's voice was professional, measured. I gave my address, described my injury without drama. Broken arm, need ambulance. She asked if I was safe, if the person who hurt me was still present. I looked toward the closed bedroom door at the hallway's end. I'm safe, I said. It wasn't entirely true, but it was accurate enough. The ambulance took 11 minutes. I stood outside despite the November cold, arm cradled, breath fogging. I didn't want the paramedics ringing the doorbell, waking Leonard and Elma, creating a scene. The neighbors already had enough to gossip about. 2 paramedics, young woman with efficient movements, older man with kind eyes. They stabilized my arm, asked careful questions. The woman's gaze flicked to my face, then the house, then back to my face. She knew. People who work emergency medicine develop instincts about these situations. Anyone else home? She asked. My daughter and son-in-law. They're asleep. She didn't comment, but something shifted in her expression. The older paramedic wrapped my arm with careful gentleness, more than necessary for standard injury protocol. The hospital emergency room smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Different coffee than home, institutional rather than domestic. Fluorescent lights bleached everything colorless. I sat in a curtained bay while a tired resident examined my arm, ordered x-rays, disappeared to read them. The x-ray technician was gentle but thorough. The images appeared on a screen. My bones rendered in black and white. The fracture line clear even to my untrained eye. The radial bone, clean break, displacement visible. The resident returned with an older physician, gray-haired woman with reading glasses hanging from a chain. She studied the x-rays silently, then studied me. Radial fracture, she said. We'll cast it tonight. You'll need orthopedic follow-up. I nodded. The resident began gathering supplies, while the doctor lingered. After he left to find a nurse, she stepped closer, voice dropping. Someone did this intentionally. I met her eyes. She wasn't asking for gossip. This was clinical assessment, pattern recognition born from seeing too many injuries that didn't match the stories. I have a better plan, I said quietly. But I need detailed medical documentation. Everything. Injury mechanism, force required, healing timeline. She considered me for a long moment. I'll write it precisely for legal purposes. Exactly. She nodded once, understanding passing between us, without further words. Some battles couldn't be fought in emergency rooms. Some required different weapons. The cast was blue fiberglass, lighter than old plaster, but just as restrictive. The doctor handed me papers before discharge. Injury report, medication information, follow-up instructions. The documentation was thorough clinical language, describing fracture consistent with forceful twisting mechanism and injury pattern, suggests deliberate application of torque. Perfect. I called a taxi from the hospital lobby. The driver didn't ask about my cast, didn't make conversation. I was grateful. We pulled up to my dark house at 12:43 a.m. according to the dashboard clock. Every window was black. No porch light left burning. No note on the kitchen table. No text message asking where I'd been. Their silence said everything. I sat in the dark kitchen, arm throbbing despite pain medication, and let the full weight of my situation settle. 2 years Leonard had lived here, rent-free, eating food I bought, using utilities I paid. 2 years of subtle dominance, gradually expanding control. 2 years of Elma choosing him over basic decency. Tonight had merely made explicit what had been implicit. But Leonard had miscalculated. He'd assumed breaking my arm would establish permanent hierarchy, would teach me submission. He'd assumed wrong. I'd investigated arsonists who believed they were brilliant. Stockbrokers who hired incompetent teenagers to torch failing businesses. Landlords who thought gasoline looked like electrical fires. Restaurant owners who didn't realize accelerant patterns show in cherub. They all shared one trait, arrogance. They all believed they were smarter than the investigators. Leonard had that same arrogance. I'd watched it grow over 2 years, seen him get bolder with each small victory. A man who breaks someone's arm doesn't hide his nature afterward. He celebrates it. He needs others to know what he's capable of, to fear him properly. That arrogance was his weakness. I slept badly, waking every time I rolled onto my right side. Morning light came gray through my bedroom window. Thanksgiving Day. Elma had mentioned 2 weeks ago that her cousin Patricia was coming, bringing her husband and teenage sons. Normal family gathering, traditional meal, the appearance of normally. Perfect. The 24-hour electronics store on Powell Boulevard was nearly empty at 8:30 Thursday morning. Black Friday crowds wouldn't descend until evening. A tired clerk in a red vest watched me browse the recorder section. My cast obvious. I selected a digital voice recorder, small enough for a shirt pocket. Simple operation. $47. The clerk rang it up. Noticed me struggling with the packaging one-handed. Need help with that packaging? I'm managing fine, thank you. Outside, sitting in my car, I tested the device. Press once to record. Press again to stop. Red light indicating active recording. Playback clear. Sensitive microphone picking up ambient sound. I practiced with my left hand until the motion became automatic. Leonard would want to perform tonight. He'd want Patricia to see his dominance, to understand the household power structure. Men like him needed public acknowledgement. They needed witnesses. I would give him his audience. Back home, I heard voices from the kitchen. Alma's light tone, Leonard's deeper rumble, normal Thanksgiving preparation sounds, the television playing parade coverage, the scent of turkey starting to roast. I went to my bedroom and practiced with the recorder, positioning it in my shirt pocket, activating it smoothly with my left hand. The motion had to be natural, unnoticeable. I recorded myself talking, played it back. Clear audio. Excellent. The doorbell rang at 3:15. Patricia's voice carried from the entryway. Cheerful greetings exchanged. I stayed in my room, the recorder ready in my pocket, my fingers resting against the button. I took one slow breath, then another. Leonard had taught me an important lesson last night. Sometimes situations require more than principles and patience. Sometimes they require strategy. I stood, straightened my shirt over the recorder, and turned toward my bedroom door. Time to let Leonard perform. The voices carried through my bedroom door. Patricia's laugh, higher pitched than I remembered, mixing with deeper masculine tones I didn't recognize. Elma's dental colleagues probably. She'd mentioned inviting them. The front door opened and closed twice more. Robert from next door. His familiar greeting rumble. The house filled with normal Thanksgiving sounds. Coats being hung. Dishes clattering. The oven timer chiming. I sat on my bed edge, right arm throbbing despite medication, and pressed the recorder button with my left thumb. The red light blinked once. Recording. I slipped it back into my shirt pocket position, so the microphone faced outward. My hand felt a small rectangular weight there, reassuring. Leonard's voice rose above the others, playing host. Put that anywhere. Just make yourself comfortable. The clink of glassware. He was drinking already. Better. I waited. Let them settle. Let the wine flow. Let Leonard's confidence build. The dining room filled gradually, chairs scraping, conversations overlapping, Elma directing people to seats. Through the wall, I heard silverware being arranged, serving dishes placed, traditional Thanksgiving setup, turkey at the table center, side dishes radiating outward, Leonard at the head. No doubt, my head until yesterday. I stood slowly, testing my balance. The pain medication made everything slightly distant, wrapped in cotton. I walked to the door, listened to the rhythm of conversation. They were seated now, passing food, the initial bustle settling into mealtime flow. Time. I opened the door and walked down the hallway. My footsteps were quiet, but audible. The conversation didn't stop immediately. Took a few seconds for people to notice movement in their peripheral vision, to turn and look. The dining room fell silent. 8 faces looked at me. Leonard at the table's head, wine glass halfway to his mouth. Elmo beside him, expression freezing. Patricia and her husband to the left. Robert and his wife across from them. 2 women I didn't know. The dental colleagues at the far end. The empty chair at the foot of the table was mine. The cast was impossible to miss. Blue fiberglass stark against my dark shirt running from knuckles to above my elbow. I walked to my chair and sat. No one spoke. I reached for my water glass with my left hand. Took a sip. The recorder pressed against my ribs, capturing the uncomfortable silence. Fork, knife, napkin. The basics of eating suddenly complex when your dominant hand is encased in plaster. I picked up the fork, left-handed, stabbed at turkey on my plate. The motion was clumsy, uncoordinated. The meat slid away. I tried again. Pain shot through my right arm. Sympathetic response to the left hand's awkward movement. Sylvester. Robert cleared his throat. His wife touched his arm, warning, but he continued anyway. What happened to your arm? Everyone looked at me. I sat down the fork carefully, met Robert's eyes, said nothing. The silence stretched. Elma shifted in her seat. Leonard took another drink of wine, longer this time. Robert, let's just enjoy the meal. Elma's voice was tight, controlled. She wasn't asking, but Robert had already asked. The question hung in the air, impossible to ignore now. Patricia looked between me and Elma. Is everything okay? Elma's expression hardened. She looked at Leonard, then at me, then back to the table. When she spoke, her voice carried that same cold flatness from last night. My husband taught him a lesson. Dad didn't understand who makes decisions in this house. The dental colleagues exchanged glances. Patricia's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Robert's wife inhaled sharply. Leonard set down his wine glass. The alcohol had flushed his cheeks red, loosened whatever restraint he'd maintained. He leaned back in his chair, my chair, with a smile. The old man thought he was in charge. His words came loud, confident. Had to show him he's not. Time he learned his place around here. Patricia started to respond, but Leonard cut her off with a raised hand. Don't start with me about respect. This is my house now. He lives here because we let him. Robert stood halfway. Leonard. That's what Leonard's voice rose. The truth. Yeah, it is. Broke his arm good. Maybe now he'll think twice before getting in my face. The recorder caught every syllable, every boastful word, every arrogant declaration. I remained perfectly still, barely breathing, letting Leonard perform. One of the dental colleagues whispered something to the other. Both looked away, then at Elma, then at their plates. The woman's knuckles were white around her fork handle. You all looking at me like I'm the problem here. Leonard gestured with his wine glass, sloshing liquid. Man's got to establish order in his own home. That's all this was, order. I said, nothing. Just watched. Calculated. 10 minutes had passed since Leonard started talking. Maybe 12. The doorbell rang, sharp, official, not the casual ring of arriving guests. Everyone froze. Leonard smiled and fade immediately. Took him a moment to register the sound, to process its implications. Then confusion crossed his face, replaced quickly by irritation. Who's that? He pushed back his chair, stood. We expecting anyone else? Elma shook her head, uncertain. The doorbell rang again, insistent. Leonard walked toward the front door, steps heavy. I heard the deadbolt turn, the door open. Yes, a woman's voice, professional and clear. Leonard Harper. I'm Detective Carolina West, Portland Police. We need to speak with you. The temperature in the dining room dropped 20 degrees. Leonard's voice carried from the entryway, confusion giving way to defensive aggression. What's this about? May we come inside? A pause, then footsteps, multiple sets moving toward the dining room. Leonard appeared first, face tight, but still trying to project control. Behind him came Detective West, mid-40s with steel-gray eyes, and a uniformed officer carrying a tablet. The detective's gaze swept the table, landed on me, specifically on my cast. Recognition flickered across her expression. I stood. The movement hurt, sent fresh pain radiating from elbow to shoulder, but I kept my face neutral. The detective stepped closer. Mr. Gibson. I nodded. She looked at the assembled guests, then back to Leonard. Professional courtesy, establishing hierarchy without words. I reached into my shirt pocket with my left hand, pulled out the recorder. With my other hand, awkward, painful, I lifted the medical folder I'd positioned on the side table hours ago. Everything is here. I extended both toward her, the injury report and his confession. Detective West took the folder first, opened it, scanned the discharge papers. Her partner moved closer to read over her shoulder. The diagnosis was clear, professionally documented. Radial fracture, deliberate twisting mechanism, force required, substantial. She took the recorder, pressed play. Just a few seconds. Leonard's voice emerged. Tiny but unmistakable. Broke his arm. Good. Maybe now he'll think twice. She stopped it, looked at Leonard. Is this your voice? That's not. Leonard's confidence cracked. It was an accident. He fell. I was trying to help him up, and everyone at this table heard you. Detective West's tone remained level. She looked at Robert. Is that correct? Robert met her eyes, nodded once. Patricia added quietly. We all heard it. Leonard's face changed again. The wine-fueled bravado evaporated, replaced by calculation. He was seeing the trap now, understanding too late that every piece had been positioned deliberately. Leonard Harper. Detective West closed the folder. You're under arrest for assault in the second degree causing substantial bodily injury. You have the right to remain silent. Wait, hold on. Leonard stepped backward. There's been a misunderstanding. The uniformed officer moved forward smoothly, handcuffs ready. Leonard didn't resist physically, smart enough to know that would add charges. But his voice kept protesting. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Elma. Leonard's eyes found his wife. Tell them he provoked me. Elma had been frozen in her chair, watching the scene unfold like a television show she couldn't change. Now she jerked upward, tears already streaming. You can't arrest him. He didn't. Ma'am, please stay seated. The detective's voice remained calm but firm. The handcuffs clicked closed. Leonard's wrists behind his back. The reality of metal against skin changed something in his posture. He sagged slightly. Elma ran to him anyway, grabbing his arm. This isn't right. This isn't. She whirled on me. Her face contorted, tears and rage mixing. You planned this. The words came as a shriek. You set him up. I spread the documents across his desk. Discharge papers, medical reports, police reports. The recording on my phone played once. Preston listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. The assault case is strong, but we need to think beyond that. He tapped his pen against the pad. Your house, it's in your name only. Clear title paid off 8 years ago. Leonard and Elma have lived there how long? 2 years and 3 months. Preston nodded slowly. Here's the complexity. This is your property. No question. But they've established residency. Normal eviction would take months. Require proper notice. Court process. However, he leaned forward. The violence changes everything legally. The violence gives us leverage we wouldn't normally have. He outlined a strategy. File for a restraining order immediately. Emergency protective order first, then permanent. Install security cameras throughout common areas. Change the locks. Document every interaction, every threat, every hostile action. Property owners' right to secure your home, he said, and given the assault completely justified. You build a case so strong they can't argue. Make it impossible for them to stay. The consultation fee was $350. I wrote the check left-handed, my signature barely recognizable. The next morning, a locksmith arrived at 9 o'clock. Professional man in his 40s who worked efficiently, asking no questions about the cast or why all the locks needed changing. Every exterior door, front, back, garage, $280, paid in cash. Saturday morning, the security company van pulled up. 2 technicians spent 3 hours installing cameras. For total, living room, kitchen, hallway, front entrance. I wanted coverage of common areas. Wanted everything documented. $890, including equipment and installation. The cameras were deliberately visible, large, obvious. Their red recording lights, constant. I wanted Leonard to know. Wanted him to feel watched in what he'd considered his domain. He discovered them Sunday afternoon. I was in the kitchen when I heard the front door open. Heard Leonard's footsteps stop abruptly in the entryway. The silence stretched for 5 seconds. Then his voice, loud and sharp. What is this? I walked to the living room. Leonard stood beneath the camera mounted in the corner, staring up at it. His face flushed red. You're watching me now. He turned on me, pointing at the camera. This is what we're doing. Surveillance, security measures. I kept my tone level. Security. He laughed harsh and bitter. You're paranoid. You're turning this place into some kind of prison. He paced, gesturing at each camera as he spotted them. Kitchen. Hallway. His movements grew more agitated with each discovery. Elma emerged from their bedroom, drawn by his voice. She took in the cameras, looked at me with something like disbelief. Dad, this is too much. Her voice carried accusation. You're making our home into a prison. We live here, too. This is my house. I met Leonard's eyes, then Elma's. I have the right to protect myself. Leonard's jaw worked. He stared at me, breathing hard through his nose. The living room camera's red light blinked steadily above us. Protect yourself. Leonard's voice dropped, became quieter, more dangerous. From what? Your own family? From whoever breaks my arm in my own study. The words landed like stones. Leonard's hands curled into fists. He took one step toward me, then another. I stood still, watching him, aware of the camera recording everything. You think you're smart? His face was inches from mine now. Think you can humiliate me? Control me? He reached up suddenly, grabbed the living room camera with both hands, yanked hard. The mount cracked, pulled partially from the wall, plastic and metal grinding. Leonard, don't. Elma grabbed his arm, but he'd already done it. The camera hung crooked, still attached by wires, but clearly damaged. Leonard stepped back, breathing hard. Triumphant. How's that for your security? I looked at the broken camera, then at Leonard. Said nothing. He wanted a reaction. I wouldn't give it. He stormed past me toward the bedroom. Elma followed, throwing me a look of mixed anger and desperation. Their door slammed. I stood alone in the living room, looking at the damaged camera. Then I walked to the hallway, opened the security company's app on my phone. The hallway camera had captured everything. Perfect angle, clear footage. Leonard's face visible, his deliberate grab. The destruction. I downloaded the file to a USB drive, pocketed it, grabbed my keys. Detective West was at her desk when I arrived at the station. She listened to my explanation, reviewed the footage on her computer. Her expression remained neutral, professional. Property destruction by a defendant out on bail. She made notes. I'll add this to his file. It won't help his case. That's what I figured. She looked at me over her reading glasses. How much longer are you planning to live in that house with him? Not my choice. It's my house. It is. But sometimes tactical retreat is smarter than holding ground. She saved the video file. The restraining order hearing is in 3 weeks. Until then, be careful. I drove home as evening dimmed into night. The house lights were on when I pulled into the driveway. Inside, I could hear the television playing. Hear Elma's voice saying something I couldn't distinguish. I sat in my car for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. The walls were closing in on Leonard. He knew it. That's what made him dangerous. January arrived with rain and official documents. The envelope came certified mail. Required my signature. Inside, legal filings bearing the header. Marcus Brennan, attorney at law. Leonard and Elma had hired a lawyer. I read the documents at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold beside me. Their version of events was barely recognizable. According to Brennan's filing, I created a hostile and psychologically abusive environment for months. The broken arm resulted from an accident during a heated argument I provoked. The recording was taken out of context. Leonard had merely been venting legitimate frustration. The narrative was careful, strategic, painting me as the aggressor. Leonard as a frustrated man pushed too far. They demanded I cease my harassment and allow them to live peacefully in what they called the family home. I called Preston. He read the filing over the phone while I waited. They're doing what losing parties do, he said finally, throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks. Don't worry, we have medical evidence, witnesses, the full recording. This is desperation, not strategy. But desperation could still hurt. That became clear 2 days later when my phone rang. Distant cousin Sharon, Patricia's sister, who'd left Thanksgiving dinner early with her family before the police arrived. How could you do this? Her voice shook with anger. How could you destroy your daughter's marriage? Sharon, what did Elma tell you? That you've been awful to Leonard for years? That he finally lost his temper once, and you're using it to ruin their lives? You had him arrested on Thanksgiving at a family dinner? Did she mention he broke my arm? That he bragged about it to everyone at the table? She said it was an accident, that you're twisting everything. Sharon's voice rose. Leonard made a mistake, Sylvester. One mistake. You destroyed my family. You trapped him. You manipulated everything. He broke my arm, Elma. I kept my voice quiet, steady. That's what destroyed things. You're a liar. She dissolved into sobs, collapsing against Leonard. He couldn't hold her with his hand scuffed. Could only stand rigid while she cried against his chest. The dental colleagues were already standing, gathering purses with quick, nervous movements. Patricia's husband helped her with her coat. Robert's wife whispered urgent words I couldn't hear. We should go. One of the dental colleagues said to no one in particular. They fled. Polite murmurs of goodbye that weren't really goodbyes, just escaped sounds. Coats grabbed, door opening and closing. Within 3 minutes, the house emptied of guests. Robert paused at the door, looked back at me. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just gave a small nod, acknowledgement, maybe approval, before following his wife outside. The uniformed officer guided Leonard toward the door. Elma followed, still crying, grabbing her purse. I'm going with him. I'm posting bail. That's your right, ma'am. Detective West handed me a business card. Mr. Gibson, I'll need you to come to the station tomorrow for a formal statement. I took the card. What time? 10 o'clock work for you? I'll be there. She glanced at the dining table. Food untouched, wine glasses half full, the wreckage of a holiday dinner. For what it's worth, you built a solid case. They left. The door closed. The house fell silent except for the furnace clicking on, pushing warm air through vents. I stood in the dining room, surrounded by evidence of celebration that never happened. Turkey congealing on the platter, mashed potatoes developing a skin, cranberry sauce settling in its dish. I wasn't hungry. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and floor wax. 10 o'clock the next morning, Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. I'd barely slept. The house had stayed empty until 2 a.m. when I finally heard the front door open. Heard Elma's and Leonard's voices, low, urgent, but too distant to distinguish words. Detective West led me to a small interview room, gestured to a chair. Her partner set up a recording device. This is voluntary, she explained. You're not under arrest, not being charged. This is just getting your version of events on record for the prosecution. I told the story start to finish. The veterans' meeting, coming home, finding Leonard in my study, the confrontation, the twist, the crack, Elma's question, the hospital, the plan. Detective West took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Her partner typed on a tablet, creating the official record. The injury is documented, I concluded. The confession is recorded. Multiple witnesses. It's a strong case. She flipped back through her notes. The bail was set at $15,000. Your daughter posted it this morning. My chest tightened. From where? Joint account. According to the bail bondsman. Her name and Leonard's both on it. The account I'd helped them open 3 years ago when Leonard started working at the dealership. When Elma said they needed to combine finances. When I co-signed because Elma asked. He's back home. The question came out flatter than I intended. Released around 9 this morning, pending trial. She paused. There's something else you should know. When we ran Leonard's background, we found a prior complaint. Workplace incident 2 years ago. Aggressive confrontation with a co-worker. No charges filed because the co-worker didn't want to pursue it, but it's documented. My hands tightened on the armrests. He's done this before. Establishes a pattern. The prosecutor will use it. She pulled a pamphlet from a drawer, slid it across the table. I recommend filing for a restraining order. Emergency protective order can be issued within 24 hours, given the circumstances you have. Strong grounds. I picked up the pamphlet. Standard public information packet. Phone numbers, forms, instructions. Thank you. She stood. Trial date will probably be set within 6 to 8 weeks. The prosecutor will be in touch. I drove home through light rain. Windshield wipers beating. Steady rhythm. The neighborhood looked normal. Holiday decorations starting to appear. A few people raking leaves. Robert's garage door open. His car visible inside. My driveway was empty, but Leonard's truck sat at the curb. I parked. Gathered my things. Walked to the front door. My key turned in the lock. Inside, the house was dim. Afternoon light filtered through curtains Elma had closed. Leonard stood in the living room, arms crossed. He'd been pacing. I could tell from the way he stood. Weight shifting, energy coiled. When he saw me, his jaw tightened. We stared at each other. 5 seconds, 10. He said nothing. I said nothing. From the bedroom came the sound of Elma crying. Soft, continuous, exhausted crying. Leonard's eyes narrowed. He took 1 step toward me, then stopped. Calculation crossed his face. He was learning. The handcuffs had taught him something about consequences, about evidence, about witnesses. But learning isn't the same as changing. He turned, walked toward the bedroom, but paused at the doorway, looked back. You think you're smart, old man. His voice was low, controlled rage instead of explosive anger. This isn't over. He disappeared into the bedroom. The door closed with deliberate softness. I stood in my own living room and felt the weight of what came next. The week crawled past like traffic on Powell Boulevard during rush hour. Leonard and Elma kept to themselves mostly. Their bedroom door closed, voices low when they spoke. I heard Leonard on his phone once, angry, muttering about lawyers and money. Alma went to work each morning, came home late, avoided looking at me. The cast made everything harder. Showering required plastic bags and tape. Typing one-handed. The constant dull ache that pain medication only softened never eliminated, but the arm was healing. According to the follow-up appointment, 6 weeks minimum before cast removal. On Thursday, I drove to the bank. Needed to transfer funds from savings to checking. The manager, Carol Hendress, had handled my accounts for 12 years. She noticed the cast immediately when I signed paperwork. Accident. Her tone said she suspected otherwise. Family situation. I kept my voice neutral. She set down her pen, studied my face. I've known you long enough to ask directly. Are you safe? The question surprised me. I explained briefly. Just facts. No emotion, the attack, the arrest, the bail. Carol reached for her desk drawer, pulled out a business card. Jonathan Preston. He handles these situations. Fair attorney, but firm when he needs to be. Tell him I sent you. I called from the parking lot. Preston's receptionist found a slot that afternoon. His office occupied the 7th floor of a downtown building with views toward the river. The waiting room smelled like leather furniture and old books. Preston met me himself. Trim man in his 50s, graying at the temples, direct handshake despite my cast. Carol speaks highly of you. He gestured toward his office. Let's see what we're dealing with. I don't want you to suffer, sweetheart. I kept my voice soft. I just want both of us to be respected. No lecture, no vindication speech, just love without condition, support without requiring submission. She cried harder, but didn't pull away. That afternoon, I met Preston at his office. The criminal trial loomed 1 month away. Final preparations underway. My investigator pulled Leonard's financial records, Preston said, spreading papers across his desk. Standard background check for trial preparation. What we found is illuminating. He walked me through the documents. Credit card statements, bank records, purchase histories. Leonard carried $23,000 in credit card debt across 4 cards, all maxed, minimum payments barely being met. Collection notices from 2 cards. This goes back 2 years, Preston said before the attack. He was drowning financially. The investigator had also found pawn shop records. Twice in the past year, Leonard had pawned items, jewelry, electronics, quick cash for immediate needs. He was desperate. Preston leaned back in his chair. Look at the timeline. Debt mounting. Income insufficient. Living rent-free in your house, but needing more. Your house is worth what? $480,000 approximately. He wanted access to that equity. Wanted you to sell or take out a loan with him as beneficiary when you wouldn't cooperate. Preston tapped the medical records. He tried intimidation. The pieces assembled into an ugly picture. The attack wasn't about respect or temper. It was about money, about a desperate man seeing resources he believed he deserved, being denied, and using violence to force compliance. This wasn't heat of the moment, I said slowly. No, this was calculated, financially motivated assault. Preston gathered the documents into a folder. We present this at trial. Shows premeditation, establishes motive, undermines any claim of accidental injury or loss of control. He paused, met my eyes. The prosecution's building their case on the recording and medical evidence, but this gives them motive. Makes it premeditated battery, not simple assault. Could increase sentencing significantly. I absorbed the implications. Every conversation with Leonard over the past 2 years recontextualized every subtle pressure about the house, about finances, about family, taking care of family, all leading toward this. He'd planned it. Maybe not the specific moment, but the strategy. Break the old man's will, take control, access the money. April can't come soon enough, I said. Preston nodded, closing the folder. One way or another, this ends at trial. I drove home through afternoon traffic, the financial records playing through my mind. Leonard's desperation explained so much. The increasing hostility, the demands disguised as suggestions, the explosion when I finally refused him something he wanted. At home, Elma's car sat in the driveway. I found her in the kitchen making dinner. First time in months she'd cooked. She looked up when I entered. Her eyes were still red-rimmed, but clearer somehow. The tentative crack from this morning seemed to have widened slightly. I'm making enough for both of us, she said quietly. If you want some. I like that. We ate together in careful silence. Not comfortable, not warm, but not hostile. A fragile truce built on the foundation of maybe I made a mistake. Later, alone in my study, I thought about April, about trial, about Leonard sitting across a courtroom, facing everything he'd done, assembled into undeniable evidence. The walls were closing in on him, from every direction now. Financial records, medical evidence, witness testimony, recording, pattern of behavior. And somewhere in his cheap studio apartment, Leonard could feel it too. The trap he'd built for himself, springing closed. Desperate men do desperate things. April couldn't come soon enough. April arrived with the kind of clear morning Portland rarely offers. Blue sky, air sharp and clean. I dressed carefully for court, choosing the same dark suit I'd worn to the restraining order hearing. Preston picked me up at 8:30. 5 months since Leonard broke my arm. 5 months of legal maneuvering, evidence gathering, strategic patience. Today it ended. The courthouse felt familiar now, its security procedures routine. We passed through metal detectors, rode elevators to the 4th floor. Criminal courtroom this time, larger than the family courtroom from January. Leonard sat at the defense table with Brennan when we entered. He'd lost weight, prison food, and stress, probably. His suit hung loose at the shoulders. He glanced at me once, expression unreadable, then looked away. Elma sat in the gallery 3 rows back alone, not beside Leonard's side of the room, not beside mine. Somewhere between us, physically and emotionally. The bailiff called the case. State of Oregon versus Leonard Harper, criminal assault in the 2nd degree. Judge Patricia Reynolds entered gay-haired woman in her 60s. Reputation for fairness and impatience with nonsense. We rose, sat, settled into the rhythms of formal justice. The assistant district attorney was a woman named Chun, mid-40s, organized and methodical. She opened with the medical evidence, my hospital records on a screen, X-rays showing the radial bone fracture, the displacement, the force required. The emergency room doctor's notes read aloud. Injury pattern consistent with deliberate application of significant twisting force. Accidental injury of this nature extremely unlikely. Then the recording. Leonard's voice filled the courtroom. Tiny through speakers, but unmistakable. The old man thought he was in charge, so I showed him he's not. Time he learned his place. Silence followed. The jury, 12 Portland residents doing their civic duty, sat frozen, absorbing the words. One woman's mouth tightened. A man in the back row shook his head slightly. Chun continued. Video footage of Leonard destroying the security camera. His face clear, his intent obvious. Pattern of aggressive behavior, disregard for property, contempt for boundaries. Then the witnesses. Robert testified first, solid and clear. He was bragging about it, proud. No remorse whatsoever. Said he taught his father-in-law a lesson. The 2 dental office colleagues followed. Both confirmed hearing Leonard's confession, both visibly uncomfortable recounting it. One woman's voice trembled slightly when asked if Leonard seemed sorry. No, he seemed satisfied. Patricia's sister, my distant cousin, who'd called me angry in January, testified reluctantly. She'd left Thanksgiving early, but heard enough. Admitted Leonard had boasted about breaking my arm. Wouldn't meet my eyes when she stepped down. 7 witnesses total, each one corroborating the recording. Each one confirming Leonard's public pride and violence. Preston took the stand as expert witness for the prosecution. Not my attorney now, just a professional, presenting financial analysis. He walked the jury through Leonard's debts, $23,000 in credit cards, pawned shop receipts, the timeline of mounting financial pressure, my house value, the clear financial motive. This wasn't a crime of passion, Preston said. This was calculated intimidation by a man desperate for access to substantial assets he couldn't otherwise obtain. Chun connected the pieces explicitly. Leonard Harper needed money. Sylvester Gibson owned a house worth nearly $500,000. When Mr. Gibson refused to provide financial access, Mr. Harper used violence to establish dominance and create compliance. Brennan objected. Judge Reynolds allowed the argument to stand. Leonard's defense was thin. Had to be given the evidence. Brennan argued family stress, momentary loss of control, request for counseling instead of incarceration. My client made a serious error in judgment during family conflict. He has no prior criminal record. Probation and mandatory counseling would serve justice while preserving his future. Judge Reynolds listened without expression. Then Chun called Elma. Leonard's head snapped up. He hadn't expected this. Thought she'd refuse. Or Brennan had assured him she wouldn't be called. His eyes locked on her as she walked to the witness stand. She wore a simple blue dress, no makeup beyond mascara. Her hands trembled when the bailiff swore her in. Mrs. Gibson, what did you witness the evening of November 20th? Elma's voice was quiet but steady. I heard my father cry out. I went to his study and found him on the floor, holding his arm. Did the defendant make statements at the Thanksgiving dinner the following day? A pause. Leonard leaned forward slightly, jaw tight. Yes. Elma looked at the jury, not at Leonard. He said he taught my father his place, that he showed him who was in charge. Leonard half rose from his chair. Brennan grabbed his arm, pulled him down, whispered urgently. Leonard's face reamed, but he stayed seated. The prosecution rested. The defense had nothing substantial to offer. Closing arguments lasted 40 minutes combined. Judge Reynolds deliberated briefly. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict essentially predetermined by Leonard's own recorded words. Guilty. Assault in the 2nd degree causing substantial bodily injury. Leonard's shoulders sagged just slightly, but I saw it. Judge Reynolds addressed him directly before sentencing. Mr. Harper, your own words recorded and witnessed condemn you. This was a violent attack on an elderly family member in his own home. Financial desperation doesn't justify violence. Nothing does. She outlined the sentence. 18 months imprisonment, 3 years supervised probation after release, $8,500 restitution, medical costs, and compensation. Restraining order extended 5 years post-release. Leonard sat motionless. The bailiff approached with handcuffs. As they led him toward the side door, Leonard looked back. First at Elma, pure hatred, betrayal in his eyes, then at me. His expression promised nothing good. But promises from prison are just noise. The courtroom emptied slowly. People gathering coats, lawyers closing briefcases, the mundane aftermath of formal justice. Outside, April sunshine felt warmer than when we'd entered. Elma stood near the courthouse steps, uncertain. I walked to her. She turned, face streaked with tears. I'm sorry, Dad. Her voice broke. I should have protected you then. I took her hand, squeezed gently. You protected me today. That's what matters most. Preston joined us briefly, professional satisfaction in his nod. Justice served. Finally, we walked down the courthouse steps together, Elma and I. She leaned slightly on my shoulder. Not heavy, just contact connection. Can I come home? She asked quietly. Really? Home this time? You never left, sweetheart. You just lost your way for a while. Behind us, the courthouse stood solid and indifferent, processing its daily parade of human conflicts. Ahead, the city stretched out, ordinary and renewed. Justice existed, but you had to fight for it. May bloomed into June, and June softened into July. The house transformed slowly, shedding its months of tension like old skin. Elma took the first major step 2 weeks after the trial. She filed for divorce. Different attorney than Brennan. Clean break from that entire period. The consultation cost $200. Filing fees, another $150. When she tried to pay me back from her savings, I stopped her. This is investing in your future. I handed the check back. Let me help. She accepted with tears and gratitude, understanding finally the difference between enabling and supporting. Leonard called from prison the first week of May. Elma answered, listened to 5 minutes of manipulation, promises to change, accusations of abandonment, demands for loyalty, then hung up quietly. He called again 2 days later. Same script, different emphasis, more anger, less pleading. The third call came mid-May. I was in the living room when I heard Elma's voice rise firm and clear. No, Leonard, I'm done. The sound of the phone being set down deliberately. Then silence. She emerged from her room 10 minutes later, face composed, but hands shaking slightly. I blocked the number, she said. I nodded. Good. She started therapy the following week. Weekly sessions working through codependency patterns, understanding how the relationship had become toxic. Not a quick fix. Genuine work, processing trauma, and rebuilding self-worth. I drove her to the first few appointments, waited in the parking lot. By week 4, she drove herself. The divorce finalized in July after the mandatory Oregon waiting period. No shared assets, Leonard in prison, no income, nothing to split, no alimony either direction. Alma owed him nothing financially or legally. The decree arrived by mail on a Tuesday. Alma held the document for a long moment, then looked up at me. It's really over, Dad. The legal part is, I said. The healing continues. She'd been job hunting during the divorce process. Applied for an office manager position at a larger dental practice in Northwest Portland. Better benefits, more responsibility. $52,000 a year. Significant raise from her previous salary. The interview went well. She was honest about recent difficulties, showed how she'd worked through them. They offered her the position the next day. She started mid-July, came home after the first day, energized in ways I hadn't seen in years. I turned 65 in June. Alma made dinner, nothing fancy, just the two of us, and presented a small cake with candles. We ate on the back porch, talking easily about work and weather and ordinary things that felt precious after months of crisis. My arm had recovered to about 85% function. Slight stiffness in cold weather, some weakness in grip strength, but functional. I'd returned to the weekly veterans meetings, picked up volunteering at the local senior center twice a week. I helped other elderly people understand their rights, recognize financial exploitation, know when to seek legal help, use my own experience to educate, to protect others from what I'd survived. Alma and I no longer operated on the landlord-tenant agreement. She contributed to the household voluntarily. Groceries, cooking, minor repairs around the house, not obligation, participation in a shared home. We talked over breakfast most mornings, discussed our days, shared small frustrations and victories. The relationship rebuilt through daily moments rather than grand gestures. Sometimes we mentioned Leonard or the trial, but those conversations grew briefer, less charged. We were moving beyond it. On a warm July evening, Elma and I sat on the front porch in rocking chairs I'd brought up from the garage. Portland summer at its best. Long twilight, warm air, neighbors passing with friendly waves. But you're acting like he's some kind of monster. You're the one destroying this family. Sharon, I have medical documentation. I don't want to hear your excuses. The line went dead. I set the phone down carefully, fighting the tightness in my chest, the legal battle I'd expected. This family member's calling me, accusing me, believing a false narrative. This hurt in ways I hadn't anticipated. Preston's office 3 days before the hearing. He'd reviewed Brennan's filings point by point, making marks in red ink. They'll try aggressive cross-examination, he warned. Brennan will attempt to paint you as controlling, vindictive. He'll imply you provoked Leonard deliberately. Don't let him rattle you. I won't. Medical evidence counters their accident claim. The recording has full context. We'll play the whole thing if necessary. Your witnesses from Thanksgiving will testify if we need them. He closed the folder. Expect it to be unpleasant. Expect them to attack your character, but expect to win. The hearing was scheduled for Monday, 10 a.m. Multnomah County Courthouse. The building loomed against gray January sky, all concrete and glass. I arrived with Preston at 9:40. We went through security, metal detectors, and bag checks. Took the elevator to the 4th floor. Leonard and Alma sat on a bench outside the courtroom with Marcus Brennan between them. Brennan was younger than Preston, early 40s maybe, expensive suit. Leonard wore a dress shirt and tie, uncomfortable in formal clothes. Elma had on a dark dress, eyes red-rimmed. They saw us. Leonard's jaw tightened. Elma looked away immediately down at her hands. Brennan stood, shook Preston's hand with professional courtesy, ignored me. We entered the courtroom. Judge Maria Santos presiding, silver hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. The formality of it, rising when she entered, the baif's announcements, made everything feel more real. Brennan went first, called Leonard to testify. Leonard described months of my supposed psychological abuse, little criticisms, constant judgment, making him feel unwelcome in his own home. The night of the argument, he claimed I'd grabbed his arm first, and in the struggle, mine was injured. Then Brennan turned to me. Mr. Gibson, isn't it true you resented your daughter's marriage? I kept my voice steady. No, you wanted them out of the house, wanted control of your property without interference. I wanted them to respect my home, and when they didn't meet your standards, you set a trap. You intentionally provoked Leonard, recorded the result, and had him arrested. Correct. I recorded Leonard bragging about breaking my arm. That's not a trap. That's documentation. Brennan pressed harder, implying manipulation, elder vindictiveness. I answered each question calmly, refused to rise to the bait. 30 years of fire investigations had taught me patience under hostile questioning. Then Preston stood. He placed the medical records on the evidence table. Hospital discharge papers. X-rays showing the fracture. The doctor's notes were read aloud. Injury pattern consistent with deliberate application of significant twisting force to the forearm. Accidental injury of this nature extremely unlikely. The recording played next, not snippets. The entire Thanksgiving conversation. Leonard's voice filled the courtroom. Broke his arm good. Maybe now he'll think twice. Had to show him he's not in charge. Elma wiped tears silently. Leonard stared at the table. Preston presented written statements from Robert, and 2 other Thanksgiving guests. Robert's testimony was particularly clear. Mr. Harper was boasting about the assault without remorse or justification. His statements were unprovoked and deliberate. Judge Santos reviewed the documents methodically. She looked at Leonard over her reading glasses. Mr. Harper, your own words condemn you. You admitted publicly to deliberately injuring your father-in-law. The medical evidence supports severe injury, requiring surgical intervention. She set down the papers. This court finds sufficient evidence of assault to issue a temporary restraining order. Leonard's knuckles went white against the table edge. For a period of 6 months, Leonard Harper is ordered to maintain a distance of no less than 100 feet from Sylvester Gibson at all times. Furthermore, Mr. Harper must vacate the residence as she read my address. Within 48 hours, personal belongings may be retrieved with police escort only. Brennan started to object. Judge Santos raised one hand. The evidence is overwhelming, Counselor. Order is granted. The gavel struck once. Leonard's face darkened with rage, contained only by courthouse protocol. Elma clung to his arm, crying openly now. Brennan leaned close, whispering something about the criminal trial, about appealing. Preston and I exited through the side door, avoiding the main corridor. Outside on the courthouse steps, winter air bit cold. That's the first real victory, Preston said. I nodded but couldn't feel triumph. Across the plaza, Leonard and Elma emerged with Brennan. Leonard stopped, looked directly at me across the distance, pure hatred in his eyes. He pulled out his phone, started dialing even as Elma tried to speak to him. 48 hours to pack. This was going to be ugly. 48 hours. That's what the court order gave Leonard, to vacate my house. He took every minute of them waiting until Wednesday afternoon, with 2 police officers standing on my porch before finally gathering his belongings into garbage bags and cardboard boxes. I watched from the living room window as he loaded his truck. Elma helped, carrying boxes while crying silently. The officers remained professional, bored, even accustomed to domestic removals. Leonard found a studio apartment in East Portland. Cheap area, $850 a month, according to what I overheard Elma tell someone on the phone. When she returned that evening alone, her eyes were swollen, but she said nothing to me. Just went to her bedroom and closed the door. February arrived cold and gray. Elma stayed in my house, but we existed like strangers forced to share an elevator. She left early for work, returned late, spent hours behind her bedroom door, talking on the phone. Leonard's voice never audible, but his presence unmistakable in her tone, defensive and pleading. I learned to cook for one again, learned to occupy rooms she wasn't in, learned the particular silence that comes from loving someone who won't speak to you. 3 weeks into this arrangement, she emerged while I was preparing dinner. Her face was blotchy, eyes red-rimmed from recent crying. You're destroying my marriage. I set down the knife, turned to face her. You could have just forgiven him, Dad. Her voice cracked. Family is supposed to forgive. Family is more important than all this. She gestured vaguely, encompassing the house, the situation, everything that had happened since November. You're making me choose between you and the man I love. I studied my daughter, 36 years old, still believing that love meant accepting whatever someone did to you. Still believing that family obligation included tolerating violence. Family doesn't mean tolerating violence, Elma. My voice came out firmer than I'd spoken to her in years, maybe ever. I loved you and always supported you. But that doesn't mean I let your husband break my bones in my own home. I held up my arm, the cast finally removed 2 weeks ago. The limb still weak, but healing. This happened in my study in the house I've lived in for 30 years, and he bragged about it. Elma's face crumpled. He made a mistake. People make mistakes. People who make mistakes show remorse. They apologize. They don't destroy property and threaten more violence. I kept my voice level, not angry, but absolutely clear. What Leonard did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. She stood there, tears streaming, wanting me to take it back. To be the father who always accommodated, who always smoothed things over, who always chose peace over principle. That father had ended on a study floor with a broken arm. Elma turned and fled to her bedroom. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the frame. I returned to cooking dinner and no longer wanted to eat. The pattern continued. Elma left the house frequently. Errands, meeting a coworker, dentist appointment. Each excuse transparent. She was seeing Leonard. The restraining order forbade him from approaching me, not from seeing her. Technically legal, technically not my business. But I knew what he was doing, reinforcing his narrative, telling her the house should be theirs, that I was unreasonable, that they deserved what I had, planting seeds that might bloom into something worse. I met with Preston in his downtown office. The criminal trial was scheduled for April, 2 months away, but we had other complications. Evicting Elma is going to be difficult, Preston said, reviewing notes on his yellow pad. She's your daughter. She hasn't committed any violence. She has established residency. Court won't force an adult child from a parent's home without extreme circumstances. So, she can stay indefinitely, even if she's hostile. Legally, yes. Unless she violates lease terms. But you don't have a lease with her. You'd need to establish formal tenancy, serve proper notice, go through eviction court, months, thousands in legal fees. He looked at me over his reading glasses. Is that what you want? I drove home through rain, windshield wipers beating, steady rhythm. The house felt too large when I entered, too despite Elma's presence somewhere within it. I couldn't force her out. Couldn't afford a lengthy legal battle with my own daughter. Couldn't live indefinitely in this hostile limbo, but I could set terms. I spent the evening drafting a simple agreement on my computer. Printed it the next morning on plain paper. Nothing fancy or illegal looking, just clear conditions. That evening, I found Elma in the kitchen making tea. We need to discuss your continued residency here. She looked at me wearily. What do you mean? I handed her the paper. She read while her tea steeped. Forgotten. The terms were straightforward. $400 monthly toward utilities and household expenses. Absolute prohibition on Leonard entering the property. Violation of either term would trigger formal eviction proceedings. You're charging me rent? Her voice rose. In my own home. This is my home. I kept my tone even. These are the terms if you want to stay. You're an adult. You have a job. Contributing to household expenses is reasonable. $400. I can barely. She stopped, realizing she'd nearly admitted something, that her money was going elsewhere to Leonard. That's the amount. Take it or find another arrangement. She stared at the paper, jaw working. I could see the calculation happening. Leonard's studio was too small for both of them, too expensive to maintain separately. Her salary alone wouldn't cover a decent apartment quickly. She'd need last month deposit. Time to save. She was trapped and knew it. This isn't fair, Dad. Neither was having my arm broken. She grabbed a pen from the counter, signed with shaking hand, didn't look at me, took her tea in the paper, and retreated. Later that night, lying in bed, I heard her voice through the wall, muffled, but urgent. He's making me pay rent. No, I signed it. I had no choice. We'll figure something out. Silence while Leonard responded. I know. I'm trying. Her voice cracked on the last word. I lay in the dark, listening to my daughter conspire against me with the man who'd attacked me, and wondered how far Leonard's desperation would push them both. March came with the first hints of spring. Crocuses pushing through wet soil, rain lightning from winter's relentless gray. Inside my house, the atmosphere remained frozen. Elma made her first $400 payment on the 1st of March. She handed me cash 400s crisp from an ATM with an expression like I demanded her kidney. Thank you, I said. She didn't respond. Just turned and left for work. I knew the money hurt her. Dental office administrators in Portland made decent money. 45, maybe 50,000, but not enough to comfortably pay me, help Leonard, and cover her own expenses. I'd seen her leaving earlier in the mornings lately, coming home after dark, extra hours, chasing money that vanished as fast as she earned it. The exhaustion showed in her movements, the slight tremor in her hands when she poured coffee, the way she'd forget what she was doing mid-task. 2 weeks into March, she visited Leonard's apartment. I knew because she mentioned it to someone on the phone. Thought I wasn't listening. When she returned home that evening, her face was tight, drawn. That night, the walls betrayed secrets. I was reading in the living room when Leonard's voice erupted from Elma's bedroom. Not words exactly, just volume and fury penetrating plaster and insulation. He was yelling at her, the anger unmistakable, even without distinguishing syllables. Elma's voice responded quieter, defensive. Leonard's rose higher. The tirade continued for several minutes. I sat frozen, book forgotten, listening to my daughter take verbal abuse from the man she'd chosen over me. Then silence, sudden and complete. I heard Elma's muffled crying through the wall. I didn't knock on her door, didn't intrude, just sat with the knowledge that Leonard's true nature was finally revealing itself to her, and hoped she was paying attention. The next morning, Elma appeared at breakfast. Unusual, she'd been avoiding shared meals for weeks. She sat at the kitchen table while I made coffee. Saying nothing, I poured her a cup, set it in front of her. Still no words. Finally, quietly, almost inaudibly, "Dad, maybe I made a mistake. Not I was wrong. Not you were right. Just maybe." And mistake. The smallest crack in 2 years of absolute loyalty to Leonard. But it was something. I walked to my daughter, wrapped my arm around her shoulders, my right arm finally healed enough for gentle embraces. She tensed, then collapsed against me, crying. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky shift from blue to orange to purple. "You know, Elma," I said finally, "justice exists, but you have to fight for it." She turned to look at me, understanding in her eyes. "You taught me that, Dad." A pause, then softer. Finally, I understood. I reached over, squeezed her hand. "You're stronger than you knew. I'm proud of you." The sunset faded to twilight. Behind us, the house glowed warmly through windows, lights in the kitchen, living room, hallway. My home, our home, reclaimed and renewed. The past 5 months had taught me more than the previous 5 years. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones that save your life. Sometimes justice requires patience, strategy, and unwavering commitment to truth. Sometimes family means setting boundaries that protect rather than enable. Sometimes love looks like firmness instead of accommodation. Leonard would serve his time. 18 months would pass. He'd be released eventually, face probation, carry a criminal record that would shadow his opportunities. The restraining order would keep him distant for years, but that was his story now, not ours. Elma and I sat on the porch, watching darkness settle over our neighborhood. She leaned back in her chair, relaxed in ways she hadn't been since before Leonard entered our lives. "The future feels different now," she said quietly. "How so?" "Like it belongs to me again? Like I get to choose what comes next?" I smiled. "You always did. You just forgot for a while." A car passed, music playing softly. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Ordinary evening sounds in an ordinary neighborhood, beautiful in their simplicity. Elma stood stretched. "I'm going to make tea. Want some?" "That would be nice." She went inside. I stayed on the porch, rocking gently, breathing the warm July air. 5 months ago, I'd been on a study floor with a broken arm, wondering if my life would ever feel safe again. Now I sat on my porch, daughter healthy and healing. Justice served, peace restored. The arm still ached sometimes. The memories still surfaced, but both were fading, becoming part of my history rather than defining my present. Alma returned with 2 mugs of tea, handed me one, settled back into her chair. We rocked in synchrony, sipping tea, watching the last light fade from the sky. No more words needed. We'd said what mattered over months of difficult conversations, painful truths, gradual reconciliation. The porch creaked beneath our chairs. The tea steamed gently. The house behind us held our separate rooms, our shared spaces, our reclaimed safety. Tomorrow, Elma would go to her new job. I'd volunteer at the senior center, help another elderly person understand their rights. Life would continue its ordinary rhythms. But tonight, this moment, father and daughter at peace. Justice served, future opening ahead. This was enough. This was everything. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.